Okay, so now let's go into why he seems like the number one suspect. There are a ton of reasons. You could attest to them more than me, but the first one to me seems to be the fact that he's already lied about how he got into the apartment and whether or not he was alone. That whole thing seems very suspicious. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so Sam, what happened? The official story, according to the reports, is that Sam said he went down to the gym to work out. They had their apartment on the 6th floor. The gym was on the 1st floor. And sure enough, when you look at surveillance or the security footage, he appears and he goes down into the gym and he's in there for some time, and then he comes up, and then we see him coming back down to the lobby several times, going back and forth. And the story was that he was looking for help getting into the apartment because it was latched from the inside with a swing bar lock, kind of like those hotel style locks. In fact, I think this building was probably a hotel before it was condos. Okay. So that's the kind of locking mechanism there was. In the report from the ME's investigator, he says that Goldberg told him that he opened it up in the presence of one of the staff members of the condo complex or the apartment complex. And that was one of the reasons why the medical examiner goes, oh, well, then that proves that Ellen was alone, because out on their balcony, which is really like a 6-inch balcony, it's decorative, really. It's not a real balcony. There are no footprints in the snow. There's nobody's coming into the apartment from elsewhere. But so Sam is my number one suspect. One, because he was alone when he supposedly broke down that door. Two, the locking mechanism was not broken off of the door. And I've done several tests to try to figure out how he could have done that.
Right. And so that's what I was going to ask you next, because I've had an apartment that has that kind of lock that you're talking about. First of all, those are like impossible to get through, number one, unless for some reason the amount of force you push into it breaks the actual lock off the wall.
Right.
And then it comes off completely. You can't sever that thing that comes out in between. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
So what did the lock look like when people were looking at it?
So the lock, there are two pieces to it, right? There's the part on the door, which is kind of like this post that hangs out. And there's hang on. This is what I've been testing with all this time.
I love it.
So there's a lock that it mounts to the door, and then on the door jamb, there's this swing bar.
Right.
And so they go together like that. And you're right. When the door opens, it latches. So if his story was correct and he broke the door open, then it has to have broken either off of the door jamb or off of the
wall.
Door. Or both, I guess it could be, right? But while the pictures show that it was forced somehow, it was still attached to both the door and the door jamb. So I guess the conclusion I came to is just that the story that he broke open the door is incorrect. It could not have happened that way.
Right. But what do you mean by it shows that it was forced? Like the screws were loose?
Yeah, a couple screws were kind of coming out a little bit. It was off of the door, but it was still attached to the door. Like there were still screws that still had a bite into that door.
I mean, if I was a lawyer, I would be thinking, well, shouldn't we call the company that makes this kind of lock? I mean, the reason why they have those locks is so you are secure, and no like 25-year-old boy can just take his shoulder and knock down that door. That seems incredibly crazy to me. So that's suspicious, obviously. I think the 911 call is suspicious. I've heard it. I thought it was sort of odd that the 911 dispatcher, who was quite calm, I guess they always are, was like, "Sir, you need to calm down for us to be able to give you help." I didn't think he was that overly.
Yeah, she chewed him out a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was like, oh, I'm sorry. If I'm looking at my dead fiance on the ground covered in blood, I'm going to be a little excited. Do you know what I mean? I'm going to be like panting and freaking out and not knowing what to do. And he's like apologizing to her. And I just thought that sounded ridiculous, you know? So I also thought he wasn't, he wasn't like breathing heavily enough. I don't know. I just thought the whole thing was incredibly crazy.
Yeah. I in my opinion, I don't even think Sam was in the room when he was talking to 911. I don't think he was anywhere
Interesting.
near Ellen. He described her positioning to the 911 operator, and the positioning was not what police found when they got there.
Okay, so that's another piece of, weird evidence, that the positioning was different than what he said. So they had talked about blood that was, I guess, dried on her face, correct?
Yeah, there was, let's see, what I think it was the left side. There's a trail of blood from like the tip of her nose all the way to her ear. But when they found her, she was leaned up against the cabinet. So her head was in the normal, like the way my head is now, right? So if her head had always been that way, then the blood would have dripped down her mouth and chin. It wouldn't have gone. So at some point she was supine, right? She was on her back. And so it's an indication that her body had been moved.
Right. Now, this would seem obvious to me that he would just say, listen, I sat her up when I was trying to look at her, or I don't know, he could answer that. And also the question would be, wasn't he covered in blood if he tried to give her CPR, or if he touched her, or if eventually he says on the 911 call, oh, there's a knife in her chest, you would think that he went to give her mouth to mouth or whatever he was doing, right? So was there not a drop of blood on him?
The police did not well, according to everything that I've seen so far, there is no report that indicates whether there was or was not blood on Sam Goldberg.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Okay. Now there was another thing that people have been talking about.
There's blood everywhere.
Right.
Blood on the cabinets, blood on the countertop, blood on the floor, blood all over Ellen.
Right. And
it wasn't it wasn't like Dexter. It wasn't like this gory scene, right? Most of the blood that she lost, it went internal. It was in her chest cavity. If she hadn't died from her heart stopping because a knife was in it, she would have drowned to death. All of her entire chest cavity was just full of blood. She wouldn't have died.
So what I also think is very upsetting for the parents, and then for the case in general, is that it was found out that she did have a journal. The parents have not been able to see this journal, which I'm assuming means their lawyers or anyone that they need to really see what was her state of mind up until then have not been able to see it. Now, I saw recently in the last week that they were saying the medical examiner is the group that has the journal, and they have not released that to anybody. I would think that has a ton of evidence pointing one way or the other. What are your thoughts on the journal?
I think it could. There are several things that are inexplicably held by the police. Her journal, her clothing, or the medical examiner's office. Her journal, her clothing, a couple of personal items are still in the custody of the police, which begs the question. In the state of Pennsylvania, as in every state in the nation, suicide is not a crime. So, I mean, helping somebody to commit suicide is often a crime, but if you were to kill yourself, that is not a crime. Therefore, they have no reason to hold anything because there's officially no crime.
Right.
But in the state of Pennsylvania, PA just has the worst laws when it comes to public records, especially exempting the police. It's very difficult to get any type of record out of the police or get anything out of the police. And so what they hide behind is this exemption that they can exempt from public disclosure anything related to a criminal investigation. Okay, so you can't have it both ways. You're holding it back because it's a criminal investigation, but you're also saying there's no crime.
Right.
It's been, so I would imagine there might be some in that journal where Ellen maybe was telling other people, she was telling her parents, her cousin, her friends, work really sucks. But in her journal where she's telling herself things, is it possible that she is telling herself that, yeah, you've got to get out of this relationship. You're getting abused. You got to go. It's possible.
What I also think is really crazy is that Sam, the fiance, has not made more of, that he hasn't come forward enough to be like, let me explain what I saw. Let me explain how upsetting this was to me. Let me, because now all we see is that he's never spoken, that he just moved on quite quickly. And within, I think it was 3 or 4 years, he was married to someone else and now has 2 children or something and lives in New York City. And, I think it's odd that he hasn't made a statement. So I think that begs the question to me, was there so again, probable cause. I'm making this up, but there is, there could have been something where they got into an argument. He was already seeing this other woman. There was something that was going on, because I do think it's odd that if your fiance dies in such a tragic way. I'm someone who has been through something like that. I had my fiance killed when I was engaged, and moving on that quick in such a way is hard. And so, and if you do it, there are reasons that you do it. Do you know what I mean? So, I just would like to know when he met this woman. I would like to know what this woman thinks. And I would think that he would be more public about losing this woman who was supposed to be the love of his life,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess there are a couple of things that kind of point toward what Sam thinks about these things, because you're right. He's never made a statement. Publicly. He's made his 2 police statements that I know of, and that's it. Number one is in a very threatening and intimidating letter that I received from his parents' lawyer. The lawyer said that they've maintained a respectful silence all these years. Okay, I don't think there's anything respectful about anything that they've done, but that's what they're claiming. Hey, out of respect for Ellen, we are remaining silent on all these things. Number 2, Sam's wife, who I don't think we need to name here because I think she's probably innocent in all of this, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But she had an article written about her. She's kind of a socialite kind of person in New York City. And she had an article written about her in kind of this mom publication about her kids and her daily life and what life is like. And she mentioned Sam in that article about, being her support and the love of her life and all that stuff. As soon as Ellen's case started getting a lot of attention, mm-hmm. and people started finding where he was and who he's married to, which I don't condone, don't go stalk people or don't go dox people like that. That came down immediately. It's like, yeah, that article was removed from the internet. So yeah, I think Sam is pretty content. Well, the evidence indicates to me that Sam is content just having no light shown on him from anywhere.
Right. Which to me is also odd, because if there's nothing fishy there, you would want, and the fact that he knows people think that it could be him. So you would think he would want to talk about it and say how upset he is by the allegations, because it was someone he loved and it was so devastating to witness the end of her life like that. I mean, that would seem very normal and empathetic to me and make him more human. Instead, it seems like he's living another life and wants nothing to do with it. And usually you're advised to not say anything if there could be things you're implicated in. You know what I mean?